Hi, good afternoon. It's June 10th, 2018. We're in Dakota City, Iowa at the beautiful park here. We have a Shaw family reunion going on. It is pretty much the descendants of Edward W. Shaw and John Allen Shaw. We do have a special guest here today, a couple of special guests, and I'll get to them in just a moment. But I want to talk about George Elmer Shaw. George Elmer Shaw was the fourth child born to Edward W. and Nancy B.B. Shaw. He was born October 31st, 1866 in Ogle County, Illinois. In 1878, Edward, Nancy, and family left Illinois and moved to Dakota Township, Humboldt County, Iowa. So George moved here with his parents, and then as he became of age, he left Humboldt County, Iowa, and he moved to Nebraska. Verdell, Nebraska, where he homesteaded. His homestead was right close to the South Dakota border in Knox County. Anyway, we're blessed to have these special guests here today. We have Nancy, who is the granddaughter of George Shaw, and her son Clint. And they're going to share some stories. Nancy about her grandfather and her father, and Clint also about their experiences. I first got a hold of Nancy on the phone here about 2 years ago, and she was shocked and surprised. She didn't know there was any Shaws in Iowa, and I didn't know there were any in Nebraska. And it's just been wonderful to make that connection. So Nancy and Clint, welcome, and tell us your story.
Okay. My grandpa George actually passed away when I don't even know how old I was, but I don't remember him at all. I remember very little about his second wife, who was Cora Ashby. I grew up on a farm. My dad and my mom had a farm 3 miles west of Verdell, Nebraska. That's where I grew up. I was actually born in the farmhouse there, which is gone now. And I was born in 1945. I was the youngest sibling of 4. I had a brother and 2 sisters. I enjoyed farm life. I milked cows. I did lots of different chores. Walked 2.5 miles to school every day and back home. Went to country school until I was 8th grade, and then I did high school in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was just enjoyable to live on the farm, hear all those stories. My dad had lots of stories, which I've kind of written a book about my life as a child on the farm. It includes things that my dad used to do that probably were kind of ornery. But if he had deer hunters that he didn't want on the property, he didn't think we should kill deer back then because there weren't that many. And one time he took the gun out in the yard and shot up in the air, and the hunter quickly retrieved out of the field and came to the house and knocked on the door and just really gave my mom heck, and she said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And my dad, he stayed out by the barn, like he didn't want to get involved. But they never came back and hunted anyway. So, or once in a while, one time he liked to play with dynamite, so he'd go blow up over by the creek or something, mess around with dynamite. And but he was a great person, and he died at an early age, 62. And
now, can I just stop here for a minute so everyone remembers? Okay, so your father's name was Delbert Shaw, and Delbert's father's was George Shaw.
Right.
George Shaw's father was Edward W. Shaw.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And he left here in Humboldt County and moved there.
Yes.
And then your grandfather George, his grandfather back in Pennsylvania was John Palmer Shaw. Okay, so just we got that lineage correct there, okay?
Thank you.
You bet.
And my relatives are buried there in Verdell, Nebraska. It's on the west side of the little town of Verdell, up on the hill. You can't hardly miss it. That's where my relatives are buried. And my mom, of course, was a hard worker, and did gardening and all those kind of things.
And her name was Dimer?
Dimer.
Dimer, yep.
And she was from Denmark, and that's where the name Dimer comes from. Yes. And I guess I was young enough, I didn't get too involved with a lot of my aunts, and my grandma passed away when I was young. Then my grandpa on my mom's side lived with us off and on in his late years. Let's see, I don't know what else to say.
Okay.
My sisters and my brother always have lived in that area. I'm the only strange one that moved away.
Okay.
So, and this is my son Clint, he's my third child.
And I have just been a collector of the stories and the history of the family for really since I was a young one. I've always been fascinated with the people that came before me, and always been very curious about why they lived where they did and how they went about their lives. I only recall, I guess, one story from your grandfather, George. And actually, it was just about his wife, that Cora Ashby, that
Cora.
she would do her laundry in the Missouri River, where they had farmed, I believe. I've seen the Platte book. I think they had 160 acres on the Platte River north of Verdell, and that she also would help to tend to the cattle on top of, I'm sure, all of her other chores. George, I don't know anything about. I did hear a rumor that that they may have had a cave on their property that a local outlaw by the name of Doc Middleton may have hid in at one time with him and his horse thieves. But I don't know if that was truthful or not. But
There's a lot of folklore, isn't there, when you
there
get
is,
to reading
yeah,
back? Yep.
it's pretty fascinating. And of course, that would have been, I don't know the year for sure either that they would have come to the area. Trying to remember. I know your dad or your grandfather Martin came around 1892, but George may have been there before that.
Well, it was around 1900s, just
Oh, was
before
it?
the 1900s, or just after,
Late
somewhere in there,
1890s. Okay.
somewhere in there, I believe.
Okay.
I believe, yes.
And then I only know Delbert Shaw through a very, many stories of his ornery character, and it's pretty fun to listen to what, kind of the character of George or of Delbert. But for one thing, I guess apparently it was pretty common for him to invite in the migrant workers as they pass through the highway if they happen to be there near dinner, and just bring them in for dinner and to share the meal with them. And that he had a very kind of open heart and tried to help people out as much as he could, even though it sounds like they didn't have a lot themselves. They kind of eked a living out of the ground, so to speak, and did pretty well. But
So your father, Delbert, shares a name with his uncle. He had an uncle named William Delbert.
isn't that funny?
And William Delbert was the youngest. And from the newspaper accounts here in the Humboldt newspapers from back in that time, it sounds like William Delbert he had kind of a wild streak in him. So,
right?
yeah.
Must run
So,
in the family.
it must run in the
It
family.
stopped just
or
before
in the
me.
name.
Yeah, right.
I don't believe that.
You don't?
That's not true.
Yeah, they did some pretty crazy things. When my uncles used to come and visit, as kids would just gather around and listen to these ornery stories, knowing that if we'd done anything like that, we'd have been in big trouble.
Right.
So, yeah, it's fun to hear the stories.
Now, you did see James quite often when you were growing up, or
Not too
occasionally?
My Uncle James was in the Navy, and I think he served in World War II, correct? And he lived in California, so he did come back a few times. We got to see him, but he passed away pretty young as well.
Did he pass away get buried in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. And he never married, is that correct?
Yes, he was married.
Oh, he
and
was,
had
okay.
3 children.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have that information,
Okay,
but
I can give
we'll
you
get
that.
that later.
Now we don't have contact with the rest of his descendants or
Not
their
now.
information.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I did.
Lost that temporarily, but we'll try to pick that back up again. And And then, so do you remember anything about any of George's siblings, or I wonder if any of them ever visited, or in the years maybe even before you were around, if there was any
Probably did.
continuing contact, or
I don't know. I can't remember what year he passed away. But see, I was born in 45, so I don't think I ever seen him at all.
and he died in 42, I think. It's always curious to see why, when a family does separate, you know, if there's still contact and how much of that, and kind of why or why not.
And plus the fact, at the age I was, I guess I wasn't all that interested in family history, so
Well, I think we have a common bond. I just started this about 2 years ago.
yeah.
And as I've explained on other videos and that, it's all about a picture of two little girls and a boy, and Dad saying, we know they're Shaws, but we don't know who they are. And it just has started an exciting journey here. But anyway, George died on February 26, 1941.
41. See, and I was born in 45. Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't get to see much of my relatives. My other siblings are older than I am, so they got to see some. But I remember when my grandma Cora lived in Burdell in town, and oh, there's just so many stories. I don't know. I've written down a lot of stuff.
That's good.
So,
My father's done some of that too. So
Right. Yeah, so pretty much like your dad.
right. That's great.
Except
That's
I
great.
don't know the mileage in between farms.
Oh, yeah. Well, he still speaks in rods. How many rods?
yeah.
So,
So,
Well, we're very grateful for the opportunity. It's fantastic that you reached out. Mom was so excited to hear from you
And
originally, and
I hope to make it out your way one of these
yes, I
days.
hope
So,
too.
Be
You're
fantastic.
welcome to come and stay
Okay.
anytime.
well, why don't you say hello and goodbye to Shaws all across the United States,
Yeah,
hello and
hello,
goodbye to
Charles.
all the Shaws.
descendants of John Palmer
Yeah,
Shaw.
come and see us.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Mhm.